So welcome to my work solutions for the Edexcel Higher GCSE. As you can see, it's the summer, June 2019, and this time we're on paper 2. So let's go. So first question, I've started writing out because these are just boring. Just get them learned whenever you're estimating a mean. Your first job for the easy mark is write out the midpoints. Some of your teachers will refer to it as X, doesn't matter. Earn your mark. Each of the midpoints, because that's what you're estimating. You are estimating that these 8 are all in the 95 category. And if they ever ask you a follow-up question, something like, explain why your answer is an estimate, then you say, because we're assuming they're evenly spread in each group, a little bit like a histogram. But the idea is midpoints multiplied by frequencies is your second job. Add them all up to get your total. Sometimes they tell you how many things are in the data, sometimes they don't. If they didn't, add up your frequencies. Now, some of your teachers might use this notation, by the way. That's because it's how we do A-level stuff with regards to standard deviation notation and stuff like that. Sigma FX just refers to the 5,400, sigma F, as in the sum of the frequencies, in this case just means 48. However your teacher writes it out, the correct answer is 112.5. On this one, I've had to cheat because my electronic pen doesn't have a compass. So to draw a perpendicular bisector, you need to set your compasses over halfway, and you could draw 2 arcs at the top and 2 at the bottom. I prefer to go for the almost semicircular approach. So metal point on E, semicircle. Pick up your compass, don't change its setting. Metal point on D, semicircle. Join your 2 crosses for a couple of easy marks. They don't come up very often, those, but do practice them. They're nice and quick. Practice your angle bisector as well. Number 3, so set notation. Venn diagrams without the Venn diagrams, really. So, explain why A intersection. So don't forget what intersection means. It means crossover, overlap, or it just means what do they have in common. And that gives you the answer to part A. Explain why A intersection B is the null set, as in there's nothing in it. Well, it's because they have no numbers in common. On part B, it says X is a member. Let's just keep it on screen. X is them numbers. It means don't worry about what all these squiggles mean. That says X is from 1 to 10. All right. Write down 2 possible values. So X, A union B. All right. So A union B. What numbers are in them all? Well, if you count up, it's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10. It's saying X is not a member of A union B. In other words, what numbers did I just not read out? And it's the answers 1 and 9. 1 and 9 are not a member of A union B, A and B all together. This one, it's quite a wordy one. This, it doesn't look that wordy, but it's quite a tricky one just to pick numbers out of. Now, although it's only worth 2 marks, I do think it's worth. And they've certainly given you a hint that you've got enough room. Now, we've already been told that there's nothing. We are told straight away at the top, there's nothing in A intersection B. So there's going to be no numbers in there. We're told that's a null. So what are we told? We're told that A intersection C, so that's that bit there, has a 2 in it. We're told the crossover between inside circle B and outside circle C, that's this region there. Okay, and the top line tells us that A union B union C contains all the numbers. That's why I've not put a box around it, because there'll be nothing outside. Now you just scroll up and you look at the information for what's in A and what's in B. So what number? We've already got the 2 accounted for. There's also a 3, a 5 and a 7. In BC, as we know, there's also going to need to be the digit 8. As I say, because if you scroll up, B has an 8 in it. All right, but it's not in the 4, 6 and 10. So 8 must be inside B, but not in that region there. And C has to contain the rest. Now, I know I've spent about 2 or 3 minutes doing that. Obviously, if you're not waffling like I am, you'd be a lot quicker. So 2 marks is not a stupid amount. So it basically says list all the members of set C. So there's a 1 and a 9 in just C, but don't forget there's a 2 and an 8 as well. But yeah, do spend your time on those. It's not difficult, but if you're trying to do it by sight, not a fan. As I say, they've given you a clue that they've given you enough space to draw the Venn diagram. I suggest you take them up on the offer. Question 4, got to say as bog standard as it gets. Volume of a cylinder. Volume of a cylinder is pi times the radius squared. So it's 7, not 14, multiplied by the height. Your calc will probably say 980 pi, but you've got to do as you're told. So change it, SD button or whatever your calc has, 3078.76, etc. But 3 significant figures means 3080 for your 2 marks. Number 5, good old wordy, but as I always do, whether you hire a foundation, I don't care. 1 line at a time. Top line, don't really care. He buys 120 books for £4 each. In other words, he spends 480. He sells half of his books, so that's 60. So half times 60 means he makes £300 on them books. 40%, I'll go down here, so 40% of. Of means times of the 120 books sell for £7 each. That's £336. He sells the rest. Well, a half is 50%, 40% gone. So we've now got to work with 10% of the 120, make him £8 each, 96. So how much does he make in total? Not his profit. He takes £732 in. Now you can move on. Because, yeah, there's a lot of work I'm doing here, but it's a 5 marker. Take your time, no need to rush to that answer. How do we do percentage profit? It's actual profit. So you subtract how much he outlaid, 480, from how much he took in, divided by the original amount, and you times it by 100. Now, if your calculator doesn't give you 52.5%, make sure you put some brackets in, because don't forget your calc does follow BIDMAS literally. At the bottom here, we do not know the original amount, but we know the values increase, so the multiplier is 1.2, with a 0 or without, no one cares. And that gave us the £15. So when you're trying to work backwards, yep, it's a reverse percentages question. So it's one of those situations where you divide by the multiplier because you're working backwards. And we get £12.50. Number 6. Don't read on. As soon as you see the word similar, that means there is a scale factor involved. Whether you want to be multiplying or dividing depends on whether you're going left or right. But to find the multiplier, divide corresponding sides. So I'm going to do 15 divided by 6 to get 2.5, or 5 over 2. The flip of it, all right, 2/5. Again, who cares? That works. So if your scale factor is 2/5, trust me, it'll work fine. How do we find the length of DF? We're getting bigger, so I need to take the 4.2 and times it by my multiplier to get 10.5. And to work out BC, that's this side here, I'll call it Y. We're going from bigger to smaller, so we need to take the 19.5, divide it by our scale factor to give us 7.8 for a nice 4-mark question. Number 7, these come up very regular, averages/mean questions where they actually give you the mean. So the key to it all is work out totals. So this second line, they tell you that the 30 students have a mean of 26.8. Get them multiplied. So their total is 804. 13 students are boys. They have a mean of 25. So for the boys, 13 times 25, 325, which means we can move on. Girls. The girls' mean will be the total of the class, take away the boys. That will give you the girls' total. But there are 17 of them. And again, like the previous earlier question, brackets just to be sure. 3 sig figs tells you it's going to be a horrible decimal. And it is 28.176, which is 28.2 to 3 significant figures. Number 8, change a speed of x kilometers per hour. So if I want to take anything from kilometers to meters, you're covering more of them. It needs to get bigger by a factor of 1,000. But how far can you run in an hour versus how far can you run in a second? Obviously, it's a lot less. You can't run as far in a second as you can in an hour. In fact, what fraction is it? It's 3,600. So you can just leave the x alone. Just press on your calc 1,000 over 60 squared, or 3,600. Now, if you do it in your head, you might get 10x over 36 when you've cancelled out the zeros, but your calc will cancel it down nicely. It'll be 5/18 of x, and that's your conversion. Number 9, there's a few bog standard questions on this paper, and here's another one. Bog standard simultaneous equations. You can treble the top one to make the x's the same. I opted to double the bottom one. So let's take the second equation, rewrite it as 6x minus 2y equals 32. Because I've made the y's have a 2 in front of them, they're what I'm interested in. And I'm sure your teachers said same sign, subtract. So when the signs are different, we are adding. So x added to 6x. The y's cancel out. Negative 0.5 added to 32 is 31.5. And if you divide both sides by 7, you get 4.5 for your x. I'll go back to my top equation. I'll write it out, but I'll replace the x with the 4.5. I have just found, and it now becomes a standard couple of steps, two-step solving equation. So I'm going to subtract 4.5 from both sides, and we divide a debt of 5 by 2. We get a debt of 2.5. Number 10. So, first of all, you've got to spot when a line, let's just do a quick diagram, when a line passes through a coordinate which has x value of 0, it's a disguised way of telling you that when x is 0, you get the intercept. The intercept is your y value when x equals 0. So we actually know all the information. It's right in front of you. Y equals mx. M is 5, that's the gradient, and the intercept is -3. That's why it's only worth 2 marks. They've basically given you everything you need. Question B, a different kind of inequalities question here. They've given you some room to work out. My advice for revision would be don't forget, horizontal lines have y equals their intercept. So if you wanted to consider what those lines are, horizontally, y equals 3, y equals 1. And you do the same vertically. You've got the y-axis, but an alternative name for the y-axis is x equals 0. And so moving on, we've got x equals 2. And so you could write your answer as 4 inequalities. You don't need to, because the x coordinate needs to be between 0 and 2, and the y coordinate needs to be between 1 and 3. As I say, if you've written them as 4 inequalities, for example, x is greater than or equal to 0, x is less than or equal to 2, and so on, they are correct, but you made extra work for yourself, and there's no need. On to standard form, number 11. The word difference means subtract. So grab your calculator and do Barcelona, because that's got the highest power. So do Barcelona minus Monaco. Your calc gives you 67,500. Give your answer in standard form though. It's a big number. We need it between 1 and 10. The power will be positive, and some of you will do it by sight, or I know some teachers will say it's in the tens of thousands, that's power of 4, and they'll expect you to know it, whereas I know some people will go, there's a decimal point. That's where we want it. It's moved 4 times. I don't care how you get it. Do whatever works. Part B, Antonio says the average crowd attendance for Chelsea is approximately 50 times. We'll stop there. Take Chelsea, because you've got a choice, haven't you? You either take Chelsea and multiply it by 50, or you take Oxford United. Sorry, I've got it wrong around. You either take Chelsea and divide it. Whoopsie doodle, because Chelsea's the bigger one. Either take Chelsea and divide it by 50, or take Oxford and multiply it by 50. On my worked answers, I looked at Oxford. When you times it by 50, you get 415,000, says the calc. When you look at Chelsea, let's take it out of standard form. That number is actually 42,000. They look similar if you were to just observe them and do them by sight, but they're not. They're out by a factor of 10. One's in the hundreds of thousands, one's in the tens of thousands. Is Antonio correct? No chance. All right. They start with a 4, but that's the only thing they've got in common. Part C is detached, basically, nothing to do with standard form. If you don't know the original amount when you're dealing with percentages, my advice is call it 100. If something increases by 15%, write down your multiplier. If it decreases by 8%, write down your multiplier. It gives us 105.8. So let's say it was in pounds. £100 has become £105.80. Or in other words, it's a 5.8% increase. Now you could have done that with X. Just call that X. And you could have just multiplied them. If you multiply them, it'll work. All right, you will get 0.58 or some, sorry, what is it, 5 points. You'll get the answer either way, whatever you do it. So, number 12, I'm moving on because I've kind of botched that. Number 12. So to calculate the perimeter, so let's go logic. If I want to work out the perimeter, I need the length AD. But with a trapezium, there's not a lot you can do. You've done a lot more work on triangles. So we know that that is 21.2 if that line is perpendicular. If it's wonky, it's not. So there we go, people. It's a hidden SOHCAHTOA question. You don't, all right, to get this distance here, I'll call it X. This is 16.7. So we're going to need to find X. This line, we've got the opposite. We want the adjacent. We're doing TOA. We want the adjacent, so it's opposite divided by T, which is tan of the angle. They want 3 significant figures, so I always work in a few more. But that's not the full picture. We might now have the length A to D, because it's 21 plus 17.9-ish. We're also going to need C to D, because don't forget perimeter means all the way around. So it wasn't just hidden SOHCAHTOA, it was hidden double SOHCAHTOA. So for Y, we're now wanting the hypotenuse. And you can use the opposite or the adjacent, it's entirely up to you, but I'll use the 16.7. So I'm going to go for opposite and hypotenuse. So I'm now doing a SOH, where I want the hypotenuse, which is Y, and therefore I'm going to do opposite 16.7, and we now divide it by the sine of 43, which comes up with 24.48-ish. Now you've got enough information. The total perimeter will be whatever you got for X, whatever you got for Y, plus the 21.2 along the top, the 16.7 down the left, and the other 21.2 on the bottom. And that accounts for the 4 sides. Yes, we've got 5 numbers, but that accounts for the 4 sides of the trapezium. Because don't forget, they account for 1 side. And on my calc, I get 101.4. 3 sig figs, only 101 though. On we go. I've filled it in already because cumulative frequency bores me. It's easy. You add them up as you go along. There you go, you get the mark. Now I'm about to go on to the next page where I've plotted them already because me and technology, nah, they don't go. So when you plot them, don't forget, for cumulative frequency, you plot the upper class boundaries against these numbers here. I've enlarged it a bit. Always use a ruler unless it says curves, so basically always use a ruler. If you're trying to draw it freehand, it messes up. I've made it bigger so it does actually cover up parts C and D. So C says find the median. Use your graph to estimate the median. Median is middle of the 80. Go along and down. As you can see, I've put a couple of notches in because it's important to realise that along the x-axis, 2 squares is 1 unit. So 16, 17, mine is closest to 18. And that's spot on actually, because the mark scheme says they allow 17 to 19. Part D mentions estimate the interquartile range. So lower quartile, 20, upper quartile, 60. Go along and down. The numbers I read, I'm at 23.5-ish and 11.5-ish. They need subtracting. I get the answer 12. Mark scheme says anything between 9 and 13 inclusive. And so for question 14, in order to be able to find the magnitude, so for example, if this was coordinates and you knew where the coordinates were, to find the magnitude, that means the size, you would find the difference horizontally, the difference vertically, and it becomes a Pythagoras question. Well, that's how it works for coordinates, works the same for vectors. So the idea is the difference horizontally is 5. The difference vertically, travelling between the two, could be 12 or minus 12, by the way, could be minus 5. No one cares because it's Pythagoras. We're going to square them, add them, and square root them. They are 13 apart. That's it. It's a hidden 3-marker Pythagoras. Number 15, one of those tougher styles of rearranging because there are 2 x's in your formula, and that's the clue that at some point you're going to need to get all your x's on one side and factorise. So first job, let's square both sides. But to speed the process up, because I do write quite large with these electronic pens, I'm going to multiply both sides by x plus 1, because that gets them all nicely levelled off. Let's expand these brackets because they're getting in the way. And now we isolate the x's. So you can either get the x's on the left or the right. It doesn't matter. It just means that your answer might have a load of negatives where the mark scheme says positives and vice versa. But trust me, it doesn't matter. I always go with moving the least complicated term. So I'm going to subtract 3x from both sides while subtracting y squared from both sides. That means I can now factorise out an x. They have an x in common. And because, again, I'm running out of room, so I'm going to cheat here, I now divide both sides by y squared minus 3. So my answer is there. It's minus 2 minus y squared over y squared minus 3. Now, I've mentioned it on my worked answers. I've done them both. The mark scheme actually went for they said the more popular solution would be to take away y squared x. Now, at the end of the day, who cares? If all these signs are different, if it was positive, positive, negative, positive, it's still the same correct answer. It's the equivalent, a bit like rationalising surds, it's the equivalent of multiplying top and bottom by the same amount. So don't worry if all your signs are different when you do this question. It's still correct. Give yourself the marks and move on. Number 16, one of those questions where you've got a bit of choice. Shall we simplify the root 8 right now, or shall we wait? Doesn't matter, is my answer. If you prefer to deal with root 8 in the question, fine. It'll still work. When you multiply by root 2, you'll get root 16. It's a square number, no problem. But for me, I'm going to change it. So I'm going to do 4 plus 2 root 2. I'm going to multiply by the conjugate, change the sign. So on the top, that's where it's complicated. There's 4 loops. So 4 times root 2, 4 times 1. Root 2 times 2 root 2 is 2 root 4. We'll tidy that up later. And the final loop, 1 times 2 root 2. And the bottom is where you only need to do 2 loops because the other 2 cancel out. So root 2 times root 2 is root 4 over minus 1. Well, hey presto, we can get rid of that. And that's a clue that you're doing it right because the mark scheme has basically no denominator. So let's tidy up the top. I've got a 4 root 2 and a 2 root 2. That's 6 root 2. I've got a 4, but let's tidy this up. That's 2 lots of 2. That's also a 4. In other words, we're done. They want the constant first, so give them it. They want the surd second. As I've always said, do as you're told, write your answer like that, and move it on. Number 17, direct proportion. As soon as you see that phrase, you should be writing y is any constant you want to use, ck whatever, to the cube of x. Now it's a bit different than the norm, because normally they give you a number, but here they're giving you like extra letters. Doesn't matter. Track on. When y is 20h, get it in there. X is h. Get it in there. It does not matter. What you do normally, if you've got numbers, you want to find out what k is. So k is 20h divided by h cubed. Well, we've got a h that cancels. So weirdly, we get 20 over h squared for our constant k. It doesn't matter. You were always going to get something slightly more complicated in the way it was phrased. What would you normally do right now? You would take your original equation and whatever you got for whatever you got for k, you'd replace it. If k was 10, there'd be a 10 there. But k this time is 20 over h squared. It's weird, but it is what it is. Part B, find x in terms of y when h. Again, if it was just numbers, you'd substitute it in. Well, crack on. So find x when y is 67.5. So we are going to replace y with 67.5h, and it's equal to 20x cubed over h squared. It looks weird. So what? I'm going to multiply both sides by h squared and divide both sides by 20. Now the answer, as you can see, wants us to write x equals. So we've got x cubed. You need to cube root both sides. When you cube root h cubed, you get h. When you cube root, use your calc, 67.5 over 20 cube rooted turns out quite nice, to be honest, because 67.5 over 20, you could have written 27 over 8. Guess what? They're both cube numbers. When you cube root them, you get 3 over 2. Turns out to be a lot simpler than it could have been. That's a sign you're going in the right direction. On to number 18. So total surface area. So it does look cubish, but they're not all the same. What we can say is that the base and the lid are. So for the surface area, the base is x squared, but there's a top and the bottom, so there's two of them. Now when it comes to the sides, the right-hand side will be x times that, as will the left. So it sounds like you can double it, but when you look at the front would be x times that as well. So in other words, there aren't two pairs, the sides are all four of the same. So you're going to be 4 lots of x times 12 minus 3x. So first job is expand and simplify. So 4x times 12 is 48x. 4x times minus 3x is negative 12x squared. So when we tidy up, I'll bring the x's to the front. There's 48 of them. Take away 10x squared. Now, a lot of these past papers have had differentiation where you go from displacement to velocity to acceleration. This is another one. This is another use of differentiation, because when you differentiate the surface area with respect to the variable x, a maximum, in other words, the total surface area will reach a maximum when this, we call it the gradient function, is 0. So when you differentiate 48x, you go to 48, and when you have a power, you bring the power down is the phrase, so 2 times 10 is 20, and you subtract. What have I done? I'm saying it, I'm not doing it. You subtract 1 from the power, so it's just an x. And now it's just a case of solving. So adding 20x to both sides, dividing both sides by 20, I get the value of x to be 2.4. But we haven't finished. You grab your calculator, because we've only found x. We're asked for the value of a, the maximum. So sub your 2.4 back in to your formula for the surface area. So press 48 lots of 2.4 minus 10 lots of 2.4 squared, and your calc should say 57.6. Units seem to be missing. Mark scheme doesn't mention it, but I added them in anyway. Number 19. So the area of the triangle on the right is 250. The area of the quadrilateral is what's required. In other words, we need to do 250 plus the area of the triangle on the left. Now, firstly, what else do we know? Well, we've got two angles in a triangle, so we do actually know the third. That may or may not come into play. But whenever you've got two adjacent triangles, the key is always find the length of any common sides. So how the heck are we going to find that? Well, why have they told us the area of the triangle? So the area of the triangle is 250. The formula for the area of a triangle, which is non-right angled, don't forget, is a half times one of the sides, 26, times the other side, AC, times by the sine of the angle between them. So there we go. We just need to grab our calculators, start with 250, double it, divide by 26, divide by sine 39. My calc says 30.55799 and so on, but that's more than 3 sig figs, so that is plenty. That means we now have that side. We can move on. Now, logic, if you want to work out the area of the left-hand triangle, you're going to need to use this same formula again, a half AB sine C. Now, because we've already got this side, we're going to need to either work out this side or that side. It doesn't really matter. I've gone for AB. Call it whatever you want, but we have a side and an opposite angle, so we're going to apply the sine rule. So we've got to work out, I'm going to work out AB. AB divided by the sine of the angle opposite, which is 47, will equal the side we know, which is 30.557-ish, divided by the sine of the angle opposite. So on your calcs, press all that in, top divided by bottom, but then multiply by sine 47. I get the value of AB to be 22.435-ish. Now we can move on. How do we work out the total area? The area of the quadrilateral is the 250 that we knew, and we're now going to do a half AB sine C. So we're going to go a half times. So don't forget, they've got their labels. We're not paying any attention to them. What does AB sine C mean? It means use the two sides and the angle between. So the two sides we know are 30.557 and 22.435, and the angle between them is actually the 38. And obviously, all that's going in your calculator. 461.058. It wanted 3 sig figs, so do as you're told. And it seems like I've scrunched that into a small space because they gave us loads more. Number 20. So you've got an equation of a line, you've got an equation of a curve. Yep, it's simultaneous equations. If you want to find where they intersect, you sub one into the other. So you could rearrange this to go x equals, but why bother? It's already done for you. So I'm going to start with the curves equation. But where I see a y, I replace it with 9 minus x. Earn your first mark. And these all follow the same process. Get them expanded, get them simplified, get them equal to 0, and solve it. Might be quadratic formula, might be factorising complete and square, we don't know yet. So just crack on with the algebra. Let's expand. So minus 27x plus 3x squared. And here, when I square brackets, I've got a method, but I'll square them and double them. So it'll be 9 times 9 is 81. We've got to double it. It'll be negative x times negative x to give x squared, but we double it. And if we expanded it, we'd have minus 9x and another minus 9x to give us minus 18x, but we double it. So now, collect like terms. How many x squareds have we got? There are 6 of them. How many x's are there? Collect like terms. There's negative 63 of them. And numbers wise, oh, I said 162. I wrote 160 like a dafty. Apologies, it is a 162. Now you've got choices. That's a difficult looking quadratic. So I would definitely recommend, if you're going to go quadratic formula, feel free. They do actually all divide by 3, which can make it a bit easier to factorise. But I'd still argue quite tough numbers for the AC method. For me, quadratic formula all day long. X equals minus b plus or minus b squared is 441 minus 4 times 2 times 54 is 432 all over 2a, 2 lots of 2. When you stick that in your calculator, using the plus, you should get x to be 6. Using the minus, you should get x to be 4.5. So, we want the y. I'll not scroll up. The equation was y equals 9 minus x. So nice and easy to finish off. So when x is 6, y is 3, y equals 9 minus x. You get 4.5. And there we go. They're very standard then. They're not easy, but it is pretty standard. If they find them tough, there's loads out there. Nearly every past paper's got something where you've got to solve simultaneous equations, but with a quadratic. Practice makes perfect. So go for it. Work hard. It will pay off. Number 21. I'll get my mouse a little bit here. So calculate the size of the angle between AF, always draw it in, and the plane. So the idea is you must draw, if the sort of, people always wonder, where do I draw that second line? Well, the idea is, if you shone a torch vertically above it, where would this thin line cast a shadow? So AF would cast a shadow over AC because F is directly above C. So the angle we are wanting is there. I'm going to call it X. So they've not explicitly given us any measurements of this cube, but they have given us ratios. Now you might sit there going, I don't know any lengths. Well, trust me, if you could call it anything you want. If AB was 1, you'd halve it. But I'm just going to use the numbers that are there because they all work in the same proportion. Because this is ultimately going to be a SOHCAHTOA question because it's right-angled triangles. Yes, it's 3D, but it is right-angled triangles. And when you do SOHCAHTOA, there's dividing. When you want an angle, this question's going to be shift sin, shift cos, shift tan. Don't know which one yet, but it's going to be a case of when you shift, it's always a divide. So as long as they're in the same proportion, then they'll cancel. So if you wanted to use the numbers 40, 20 and 30, double them all, 8, 4, 6. It's entirely up to you. I'm given 4, 2 and 3. I'm going to use them. So to find X, good news, we've already got the opposite side. To find an angle, you need one of the other sides. Well, let's look at the floor. There's a right angle there. Don't look like it, but it's because of perspective. Fact is, to find AC, A to C is the hypotenuse of a right angled triangle. So we are going to square them, add them, and square root them. You should get root 20, 2 root 5, or a decimal. Feel free to work with any of them. But that now means we've got the opposite. We've got AC, which is the adjacent. Opposite and adjacent means you are working on a TOA question. We want the angle. Whenever you want an angle, it's shift inverse or second function, whatever your calc has on it, usually the top left button. Shift tan, and its opposite, which is 3, divided by adjacent. Stick that in your calc. I get 33.85-ish. They want 1 decimal place. I always do what I'm told. 33.9 it is. Number 22. These are difficult, but they are bog standard. They come up all the time. Factorise the top, factorise the bottom. The bottom is the easiest because it's the difference of two squares. 4 is a square number, 25 is a square number, x squared is an unknown square number. So you do 2x plus 5 and 2x minus 5. Now, first thing you'll notice on the top, it's not a quadratic, it's a cubic. We need to take out an x. So when you take out an x, we are left with 6x squared, 13x and minus 5. So it's this that needs to be factorised. On the bottom, you get a clue. That means one of these brackets is going to cancel out. One of these brackets on top is going to be 2x plus 5 or 2x minus 5. So it does narrow down that this is going to be the case. It can't be 6x and 1x because nothing will cancel. So you could use the AC method. I preferred to do it by sight, trial and improvement, whatever you want to call it. It's a minus 1 and a plus 5. But however you get there, no one cares, as long as you get some stuff cancelling. But unfortunately, that's all that cancels. So it's still a reasonably tricky final answer, but it is what it is for your 3 marks. Number 23, these have been quite popular, I think, on the last 4 sets of papers I've done. These unknown probabilities have cropped up on them all, where they give you the final answer and you've got to work it back. So, Boris has a bag that only contains red and green. Boris takes 2 sweets at random. So there's going to be a multiply, because it's going to be sweet, then sweet. The problem is that Boris takes 1 red. So probability of a red and a green. Now, a little stress, don't forget, you can reverse them. Getting 1 red is red-green or green-red. In other words, double something. All right. Next bit. Originally, there were 3 red sweets in the bag. So basically, God knows how many green. So let's refer to the total number as x. So if there's 3 red, there's x minus 3 lots of green. So the probability of picking a red first pick would be 3 out of the total number of sweets. But then we go back again to pick another sweet. This time we want a green. So how many greens are in the bag? X minus 3, because we don't know. But how many sweets are in the bag? Well, there's 1 fewer. And we know that that is equal to 12 over 35. And this now means you've got an equation. Let's create some space and get it solved. So I'm going to multiply both sides by x and x minus 1. And multiply both sides by 35. So I have a 12 and an x and an x. A 12 and an x and a minus 1. Now also you could. I'm just shortening the process here, trying to cut out the waffle. If you need an extra line of working out to get to there, feel free. So they've gone. I now need to deal with the fact I've got a 2 times, and I'm timesing by 35. So that's essentially 70 times 3. So I've got a 210 times x. and a 210 times -3. These numbers don't look right, but trust me, they are. Let's rearrange to equal 0. So 12x squared, we'll leave them alone. We've got -12x, take away 210. Looks like a preposterous 222x, but it is correct. And we add 630 to both sides. Again, like an earlier question, you could straight off use the quadratic formula because it's certainly not one to complete the square or factorize. They do actually all divide by 6. So you do make it a bit easier to factorize. But personally, I am sticking this into the quadratic formula every day of the week. So x is going to be minus b plus or minus b squared. Don't know it, so I'll just use my calc. Minus 4 times 2, that's 8, times 105. All over 2a, which is, in my case, 4. One of the answers you get, if you use the minus, you get 3.5. Now, I will just stress, don't forget what x means. X tells you how many sweets are in the bag. You can't have a fractional amount of sweets. So that answer needs rejecting. If you use the positive, though, you do get 15. All right, so we get x to be 15. Work out how many green sweets were originally in the bag, not x. Green is x minus 3. So x equals 15. There are 12. So originally there were 3 red and there were 12 green. Job done. Number 24. Here we go. So f of 5, that's dead easy. 3 times 5, 15. Take away 2. That's not the difficult bit. This is the difficult bit. So to find an inverse function, you normally need to rearrange to make x the subject and flip around the x and y's. Trouble is, this is a quadratic. And the only way you can do that with a quadratic is by completing the square. Otherwise, you will get nowhere fast. So let's complete the square inside these brackets. Halve the number next to x, square it and take it away. And now it's a case of we've just got the 1x. We need to get it rearranged, expanded, all that malarkey. So 2 times everything in the brackets gives me that. 2 times -25 is -50 plus the 9. So we've got -41. Now we need to rearrange to make x the subject. So firstly, I'll do y plus 41 and then divide by 2. And that gives me my x minus 5 squared. Then we're going to square root both sides. While, once we've square rooted, we can then get rid of the minus 5. And that's our formula for x equals. And most teachers will firstly tell you that you flip around the x and the y, and that's what goes in your answer space. And for reasons I won't go into now, I mentioned it on another video, we reject, just get rid of the minus. We're only interested in the positive square root. In fact, there's a little bit of a clue there, but I don't want to overcomplicate right now. Your answer is simply 5 plus the root. And don't forget, you've flipped around the x's and the y's, so it's x plus 41 all over 2. Because that's enough for your 4 marks. You've done a lot of work there. There's no need to worry too much about why do I ignore the minus. There are reasons around. Let's just go with that's just how it is. As I say, I've already done it on a couple of other videos, so feel free to go and watch. I think it was the R paper of this exact year where something, or certainly the paper that immediately preceded it. So have a look at January 19. That might answer your questions. But anyway, I'll shut up. The paper's done. Pretty standard throughout. Just some tricky stuff, but again, there's nothing really to catch you out on that paper. It's just a good revision paper, well worth putting some time into. So well done on getting this far and revising. I'll shut up. Hope that's helped. See you on the next one.